Welcome to the CEO Project Podcast, where Jim Schlexer, author of the best-selling book, Great CEOs Are Lazy, and the founder of the CEO Project, provides ideas and tools to help CEOs of mid to large-sized companies grow and optimize their businesses. Now, let's get started with the show. Welcome, everybody, to the CEO Project Podcast. My name is Jim Schlexer. I'm your host and the founder of the CEO Project. Well, today we have a world-renowned specialist in human behavior. Dr. John Demartini is a world-renowned specialist in human behavior, researcher and author and global educator. He's developed a series of solutions applicable across any market. So anybody listening, this is for you. His education curriculum ranges from corporate empowerment, financial empowerment, self-development, relationship solutions, and social transformation. He addresses the human factor and has a powerful set of tools that have proven the test of time. He's stood over 30,000 books across defined academic disciplines, and he synthesized this wisdom into his Demartini Method that he has taught on stages over 100 countries. He does keynotes, seminars, workshops, and works directly with clients. He's addressed public and professional audiences up to 11,000 people at a time, and he shared the stage with some of the most influential people such as Sir Richard Branson, Stephen Covey, Stephen Wozniak, Robert Kiyosaki, Tony Fernandez, Wayne Dyer, Donald Trump, and many more. From thousands of testimonials he receives annually, Demartini's work changes people's lives forever. So, hopefully we can scratch the surface of that today in our conversation. Welcome, John.
Thank you for having me. Looking forward to it.
I'm so glad you came. So, how did you focus in on this issue of sort of human potential, human performance, and unlocking the keys that help people get at their maximum potential? What brought you to that place?
I had a learning disability as a child.
Mm-hmm.
I had to wear braces on my arm and leg on the left side,
Wow.
which I felt constrained. I was told in first grade I would never be able to read, never be able to write, never to be able to communicate effectively. I'd probably not go very far in life, not to amount to much. I had left school at a young teenage 13, became a street kid and a surfer.
That's pretty much the same thing.
Yeah. Well, I left Texas, moved to California and Mexico when I was 14. 15, I moved to Hawaii. I rode big waves in Hawaii. Got to be in the upper leagues of the surfing world. Nearly died at 17. In the recovery of that, I was led to a little health food store and a yoga class. And at one night, one man in 1 hour spoke to me in a way that I never thought, I wasn't expecting it. Made me believe that I could overcome my learning problems.
Wow.
It made me believe that maybe someday I could become intelligent. And so that was a trajectory changer. I remember that night I said, it would be really inspiring to be able to do what this man's done for other people. I would love to do that myself.
Wow.
So I flew back to California, hitchhiked back to Texas, took a GED, high school test, miraculously passed it by guessing. Tried to go back to school and failed. Almost gave up. Something my mom said to me when she saw me crying in the living room floor when I failed my first test. I got a 27. I needed a 72 to pass.
Wow.
She said, son, whether you become a great teacher and travel the world like you dream, or return to Hawaii and ride big waves like you've done, or go back to the streets and panhandle, I just want to let you know that your father and I are going to love you no matter what you do. When she said that, my hand went into a fist. I said to myself, I'm going to master this thing called reading and studying and learning. I'm going to master this thing called teaching. And I'm going to master this thing called traveling the world, because that was my dream, to travel the world and teach. And I'll do whatever it takes, travel whatever distance, pay whatever price to give my service of love across the planet. I hugged my mom. I went into my room. I got a dictionary out. I started memorizing 30 words a day and repeating it in sentences, writing them out 20 times, pronouncing them 20 times, saying them 20 times. My mom would test me on 30 words a day. 2 years later, I had 20,000 words memorized. And I went from the bottom of the class to the top of the class. And for the next nearly 10 years, I excelled.
Hmm.
At 18, I read a little book from Einstein. He said the greatest teacher is exemplification. So I thought, I want to exemplify what I learned. And then I saw David Carradine on Kung Fu.
Oh my gosh. Yep.
And in 1973, I think.
Yeah, I unfortunately can relate to this particular topic. Keep
Yeah,
going.
I'm 70, I'm going on 71. So we're, I don't know what your age is, but I he talked about his master, his Shaolin master. And I think the master called him Grasshopper.
Mhm.
And I thought, I want to be a master. I want to master my life. So I started to look at what would that mean? And I divided life into 7 areas.
Mhm.
Our what inspires us, our spiritual quest, our mind and genius awakening quest, our business quest, our financial quest, our family and relationship quest, our social leadership quest, and our physical well-being. And I wrote out how I wanted to be. Paul Bragg said that what we think about, what we visualize, what we affirm, what we feel, what we write out, what we act upon impacts our life.
Yep. Absolutely agree.
So I did all that and I wrote out my first little master plan. I wanted to create original ideas that serve human beings across the world. I wanted to have a global business. I want to be financially independent. I want to have a global family, not live in any one place. That's why I live on the ship, traveling around the world. I wanted to meet amazing people, go to amazing places, and study society and hang out with the movers and shakers. I wanted to be vital and energized to a
Mhm.
ripe age. And I wanted to create some sort of a movement. I didn't want to follow a culture. I wanted to create a culture, a movement of inspiration for people. And so that became my quest, my relentless quest and mission. And that was 1972-3. And for the last 52 years, I've done nothing 7 days a week but that.
Hmm.
And I've been teaching for 52 years now, and I've spoken from 161 countries.
That's pretty much all of the UN defined countries, by the way. You're darn
Well, no, I
close.
still got 30 to go, about 37.
Okay.
I had a dream to go to every country on the face of the earth and research and share.
Mhm.
I've been reading every single day since then. I don't go a day without reading and learning. And I try to share information. I want to study the most universal principles that would stand the test of time.
Hmm.
So I became polymathic and I wanted to multidiscipline myself because I wanted to get the most probable information that I could rely on. A universal law is something that would be universal through all the disciplines. So I basically outlined every discipline known, and I made a commitment to read at least 100 books in each discipline so I would have a higher probability of information that I could rely on that people could build on.
Mhm.
And so that's been my quest. And, people think I'm a weird guy because I want to just do that. And people say, why do you do that? You're independently wealthy. Why do you do that? And I just tell them because I can.
Yeah, well, and this isn't about money, right? I mean, money
No,
is,
no.
I tell people money is the score as a result of doing great work.
Doing what you love. That's
The
it.
great work is the
It's
thing, not the
meaningful.
money, right?
Exactly. So I always say money without meaning leads to debauchery, but money with meaning leads to philanthropy, and I'm more in that direction.
Yeah, I've seen the first. It gets ugly.
Yeah. And so I'm a man on a mission. I'm not interested in success or failure. I don't have a fantasy for success and a fear of failure. I just a man on a mission. I just work on it every day. I don't compare myself to other people. I compare my actions to my own objectives.
Right.
And I prioritize my life. I've delegated everything except teach, research, and write and travel. So I don't do anything. I
Fabulous.
haven't driven a car in 35 years, haven't
Yeah.
cooked since I was 24. I have people who love doing what I like to delegate. Anything that requires external motivation to get me to do something, I just find somebody to do it so I don't have to be distracted by external promotions or anything.
Stop on that for a second because I think this is a message for CEOs and entrepreneurs, right? About what do you delegate and what do you keep. So talk about that a little bit about like what should be in my circle of things that I spend time on and everything else. Your point, you've been very clear. Everything else goes away. How do we think about that? How can you guide people on deciding what's in and out of the circle?
Can I share something that happened to me that helped me in that?
Please.
When I was 27 years old, I put my shingle out as a professional healer, doctor.
Yep.
And I really didn't know a whole lot about business at the time, and I was kind of naive, and I was learning academic stuff, but I really wasn't business savvy.
Yeah.
And I was doing everything. I had one assistant and I was doing everything. And I didn't feel like I'd gone to school for all that.
Yeah.
I wanted to do clinical work and not all this administrative work.
By the way, a lot of doctors run into this problem. They're super smart and they're like, oh, by the
Exactly.
way, you're now running a small business. They go, I never got trained to do this. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I went to then Walden's bookstore.
Yeah.
It was a chain, and I went
Yeah.
there and I got the book, The Time Track by Ellen McKenzie.
I know it. Good book.
And I devoured that book, dog-eared it, yellow marketed it, that kind of stuff. And I created a chart that I'd love to share because I'm certain it makes a difference.
Mm.
I've shared it in governments and corporates and you name it.
Yeah.
I created a piece of paper and I divided it into 6 columns, 5 lines, 6 columns. On the far left line, column, I mean, at the top it says daily actions.
Mm.
So I wrote down every single thing that I did in a day,
Yep.
not broad, vague, general labels like sales or this, but the actual action steps that I did moment by moment through the day. And I divided it into professional and personal.
Hmm.
And I looked at what the truth was, not the fantasy, but the truth of what I was actually doing in my day and how I was spending my time. And I did this factoring in a 3 month period of what I might do during a 3 month period. Because sometimes I might do something only once a week, et cetera.
Yeah.
I put it all in there. I want to know what is Dr. Demartini doing with his time so I can't lie to myself about how productive I am. I want to look.
Hmm.
And I listed everything. And as I was listing it, I was already getting prompts, intuitive prompts saying, I'm majoring in minors and mining in major. I'm doing a whole lot of stuff that's not really productive and prioritized and meaningful. So, but I still did it. And on the second column, I wrote down how much does that produce per hour? And I
Hmm.
defined productive per hour by how much I was doing a service that somebody would pay for.
Right.
And I did productivity per hour. And so if I did a narrative, for instance, and it was $400, but it took 2 hours, it's 200 an hour.
Hmm.
If I did your analysis and it was $10, I go, okay, it takes 2 minutes. That's 30 times 10, that's 300 an hour. And I broke it down and I itemized it to the best of my ability, extrapolating what exactly was my value per hour doing these things. I found that 30% of what I was doing, I wasn't getting paid for.
Yep. I'm surprised that it's that little, frankly.
Yeah. Well, I then made a decision that I was going to charge for some of my services that I hadn't been charging for,
Hmm.
because if not, I was uninspired to do it and I couldn't extract surplus labor value out of delegating it.
Yep.
And I was just busy, but not productive. So I then did it based on what produced the most down to least
Mhm.
and prioritized the entire thing. And that was liberating and invigorating. But I also realized something that shocked me, that the most productive thing I could do was not actually clinical work with clients,
Oh,
which is
wow.
what I'm training for.
Yeah.
The most productive thing I could do was going out and doing a presentation in front of an audience that would generate new clients and delegating other doctors to do some of the clinical.
Mhm.
Because I could generate, $10,000, $20,000 an hour doing that, or I could make maybe $2,000 an hour doing the clinical.
Right.
So that was a bit of a shock because I realized that what I was going to school for was actually going to put me in a box, some of it. And that was a bit of adjustment to my head.
Yeah.
After I got that and I prioritized that, I saw that there were really only 3 things that it'd be wise for me to be doing.
Hmm.
And I was doing 150 things.
Yep.
The next column, the third column, which is how much meaning does it have on a 1 to 10 scale?
I like that.
One being something that awakens tears of inspiration where I want to tap dance to work, as Warren Buffett says.
Hmm.
I chatted with Bill Pollock from Drake International. He's a kind of a friend. And he says, in 1951 is the last day I ever went to work.
Yeah.
I
Yep.
do what I love every day. And he works 7 days a week. I do too, pretty well. And he just loves it. And I wanted to make sure that I couldn't wait to get up in the morning and be of service so people can't wait to get that service. When the patient or client was the innermost dominant thought in my mind, it became the innermost dominant thought in their mind. It was like a
Hmm.
reflection. So I
Hmm.
basically wanted to make sure I was only doing the things that were inspiring to me, that brought a tear of gratitude, that would make me grateful for my what I was doing, love what I was doing, inspired by the vision, enthusiastically working, certain about my skill and present while I was doing it.
Yeah.
Because there's a magnetism that comes from that. It makes the telephones light up. That's all I can say.
Yeah.
And it stimulates a naturally existing economic relationship, a natural right customer. It just resonates really beautifully. So I then prioritized the list according to what was meaningful.
Hmm.
And then I looked at where it was most productive and most meaningful. And I was blessed because many of them overlapped, which usually is, because you're
Yep.
most inspired when you're doing something that makes a difference in people's lives, where you get rewards in life.
Yeah. They talk about 10,000 hours or that whole thing about, or do what you have passion for. And the real answer is do what you love enough to spend the 10,000 hours to get great at it, right?
Yeah.
It's
Well,
that order.
I've been teaching one course that I've been teaching for 36 years.
Well, you're probably getting good at
1,200,
it.
yeah, 1,231 times.
Yep.
It's a 25-hour course. And it's literally, if you multiply 1,230 times 25 hours, it's 30,000 hours, basically.
Yeah. Like I said, you're getting good at it. Yeah. I
I'm
get
getting pretty good at
it.
it. When I introduced it, I say I'm starting to get pretty good at it.
Yeah. There you go.
But, but when I took that and I looked at where there was overlap, I was liberated just emotionally
Yeah.
because I knew that's where I needed to be. It was clarity of my priority.
Yep.
The fourth column, how much would it cost to delegate that
Yeah.
to somebody who is engaged, inspired, and more productive, an A person that would allow me to delegate that and not be thinking about it, where I don't have to micromanage or push somebody uphill, etc. And how much would it cost? And I'm not talking about their salaries because it's at least 3 to 4 times that, but the all cost,
Yep.
depreciation costs, flower maintenance cost, that kind of stuff. Every cost, down to the paperclip. And I looked at that and I looked for where the spreads were between what it produced per
Yep.
hour to be able to look
Yep.
at what I could extract as a surplus labor value.
Yep.
And then I prioritized that list according to spreads.
Mm.
And when I did that, I realized that when I hire somebody, I ask them a series of questions. I take the very specific action step job description and I find out what their highest values is and what their life demonstrate because I developed a system for that. And I make sure that when they're doing an action, I ask them how specifically is doing this action going to help you fulfill what's most meaningful to you. So you're inspired. Because if you're not inspired, I'm not hiring you. I don't want to hire somebody just because they got skill. I want to hire somebody because they can't wait to get up in the morning and do it.
Hmm.
And I try to learn that art of hiring people so you put the right person on the bus. Then I went to the next column, the fifth column. And that was how much actual time is actually allotted for this.
Mm.
Is it 10 minutes a day? Is it an hour a day? Is it 4 hours a day? And then on the final column is the final prioritization, factoring all the variables. And then I layered that in 10 layers. And I created job descriptions and unloaded the lowest layer, the second layer, and the third layer, etc. And I hired people. And it took me
Hmm.
3 people to get the first, it took me two
Yep.
people to get the second. And then I started getting either 1 or 2 people, and I would screen them and get them 1 or 2 times. I got better at it. I
Yep.
was the Terminator like like Arnold at first, but then I got to be pretty good at it. And as I layered and delegated that, I felt myself lifted up. My energy level was freed. My clarity and my distractions were lowered. And I was now not in entropy. I was now in negentropy and syntropy towards growth. And in 18 months from reading that book, uh, I went from a little 970 square foot doctor's office to a 5,000 square foot office with 5 doctors, 12 staff members, making 10 times the amount of money and only doing 3 things.
Hmm.
That was going out and doing presentations to public or doing radio or television. I had my own TV show by then. And then I ended up doing training for the doctors and staff, and then only clinically working with the absolutely most influential people. And I
Really.
delegated the rest away. And then I spent the rest of the time researching and learning, trying to feed my mind new information that would help me get a competitive advantage. That little exercise is worth the time. It's
Yeah.
really
Well, I
time.
got a couple of questions about that. If I have something that's not motivating, it's the bottom of my motivational scale, right? I just hate to do this, but there's no labor arbitrage available. Still worth paying somebody else to do it because of the energy release?
What I tell people to do, either go do what you love through delegating or love what you do through linking. So I ask, how is that job duty helping me fulfill my mission?
Right.
And I rearrange neuroplastically in my brain the pathways so I see it on the way, not in the way. And I hold myself accountable till I see it and I'm inspired to do it. But once I do, I keep my eyes open because it's not producing as much
Right.
as what I could be doing. I
Right.
find some. There's
Okay.
always somebody to do it. So I
Yeah.
only teach research, write, and travel today. Everything else
Right.
is delegated.
And,
I
and your
even
idea is you link the pathway to the value creation exercise. So even though it directly doesn't yield value, it does enable value to be created. Therefore, it
that's
has
it.
a value. Therefore, I
That's
can
it.
lay it off and be okay. Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then I find somebody because I really believe there's always somebody you can find. There's always just a matter of finding it.
Yep.
I delegate everything. I told my girlfriend, I said, I delegate everything, and I'm not the greatest in lovemaking, so I'm going to delegate that to George Clooney. And she said, if you delegate that George Clooney, I'm still going to love you.
I think I might love you more.
I love you more. That's how it's the only way I told her it's the only way I can keep you in my life.
There you go. What about the issue of, and by the way, boy, you got me thinking here, but in the book Who, which is by Smart, they talk about skill and will, right? So you're really about, I want the will to be off the charts. The skill is everybody, a lot of people have the skill, it's the will. But what about talent on this? So, let's say I do this exercise. And by the way, for those listening, this is, well, John's talking about doing this for himself. It is relevant to you and your business as well. This is a larger or smaller ecosystem. The same concept could be applied, by the way. But what happens when you have something that is really high value? I really like to do it, and I'm really not very good at it. How do you layer in capability?
Well, you want to know your core competence
Sure.
and you want to be honest about it. I learned that from Charlie Munger and Warren. If it's not your core competence, admit it to yourself.
Yep.
And if you can link it to what's highest on your value, and you can link what you are wired to learn, either through skill or intellect, to what is valuable, you can accelerate the learning process. The question is it wiser to go through the learning curve or is to find somebody that's adequate at doing that and doing the job? Anything that I have to be reminded, motivated to do extrinsically, anything that I find myself procrastinating, hesitating, and frustrating on, I delegate.
Mhm.
I don't waste my time trying to do a learning curve on. I just find somebody who loves doing it and ask them to take care of that for me. I don't mind learning it, but if it's not something that inspires me, I always say when the why's big enough, the house take care of themselves. If you really have a big enough reason to do it, you will find a way of doing it directly through you doing it or indirectly by delegating.
Right.
But most people are afraid to delegate. The time trap outlines all the reasons why people are afraid to delegate. And I had all of them. I had every
Yeah.
one of those, but I learned to let go. And I found that if it's not something I spontaneously, in the brain, in the medial prefrontal cortex, the ventral medial prefrontal cortex, which is the most advanced part of the brain before the lamina terminalis, right there at the third ventricle, that area of the brain has spontaneous action potentials initiated. They're not
Hmm.
evoked from stimuli externally. They're spontaneously inspired things, action potentials, and they elicit what they call gamma synchronicities in the brain, where you have the big aha and eureka and moment of inspiration. So when you're doing the very highest value in your life, the thing that's most important to you, the most inspiring, that area of the brain lights up, it spontaneously activates, and you spontaneously act. If you require any reminding or any external motivation to do what you say is important, it's not what's important.
Right. Yep. No, I
I
get
mean,
it.
I've been studying values for 46 years and written books on it. The brain and value systems are correlated. The cingulate gyrus and the amygdala are for lower values, and the medial prefrontal cortex is for higher values. That's the executive function. That's where you have strategic planning and expanded space and time horizons. And there's an area in that part of the brain that links up with the V5, V6 area in the occipital cortex and lights up inspired vision, and it opens up clarity of vision. And your vitality in your life is based on the clarity of your vision. The
Yep.
vitality is based on the vividness of the vision. You have a clear vision, you're going to scale up. If you have a clouded vision, you're going to plateau.
Yeah. Well, we tell people, I actually wrote it in my first book, Alice in Wonderland meets the Cheshire Cat. There's a fork in the road. She goes, Cheshire Cat, which fork road should I take? And he goes, well, it depends. Where are you going? She goes, well, I don't know. And he goes, then it doesn't matter which road you take. And
Exactly.
that's the point of a cloudy vision. If I'm clear, I go right every time. If I don't know, right, left, I don't know. One of them, I don't know
Well,
the answer, right?
imagine getting in an Uber and you don't know where you are, you don't know where you're going, you don't know how you're going to get there. It's not going to go far.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It felt like you were really going down the law of attraction in the beginning of this conversation. I mean, sort of where your energy is, where your power is, where your enthusiasm is, and you can literally draw people and things into your life. Have you seen that work? I mean, what do you think about law of attraction as an idea? Because I know a lot of entrepreneurs, they talk about manifesting, which is the new word, but law of attraction has been around for a long time. How do you think that plays out in somebody's life when they're aligned in this way?
Well, I was in that movie, The Secret. So I was one.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
So I'm the one that developed that whole system.
Okay.
So I have some background on that. But I'm not interested in the esoteric as much as I am the grounded neurology of it. My background's in neurology too. So there's an area called the relay station in the thalamus,
Hmm.
which all sensory information in the spine that come in the spine and in the brainstem pass through.
Yep.
It's called the pulvinar nuclei. It is a gating and filtering mechanism that takes sensory information and anything that's highest on your value, your telos, your end in mind, your chief aim, anything that's really highest on your value, it filters it out of all the infinitude that's coming in. And it goes up into the conscious awareness and the sensory cortex and is allowed to go in for action. And it is
Hmm.
linked to the medial prefrontal cortex through the cingulate connections. So when we're doing something that's highest on our value, the resources around us that we see are clear. We
Yep.
see things on the way, not in the way, and we extract out of the infinitude of information what's priority.
Yep.
So we increase the probability of synchronizing and seeing what resources are required for what we have as our highest value, our mission.
Got
So
it.
it's not so much an esoteric thing. You think about something, you just esoterically manifest this thing. Although I'm not going to negate the idea of a resonation and vibration, but I'm more likely to know that I want to know a grounded reason why things occur so we have something that's reproducible and duplicatable.
Yeah.
So there's no doubt in our minds. I mean, we did research in the 80s in doctors' office because I went to 1,000 doctors' office during the 80s and did consulting with all these doctors. And we found out that if we pulled out inactive patient files and took out anybody that had not been in their office in 6 months and read the file, but get the staff together at lunch and have a quick snack lunch and read the files, that 20% of those people that were inactive would call within a week and show back up in that office. Now, I don't know if they went out and get another car accident to do it, but they would come back in the office. But what we focused on, without a doubt, had an impact. Now, we now know that when we're in a state of presence, a state of synchronicity in our brain, a gamma synchronicity, which is an alpha theta junction, when we do that, the synchronicity in our brain impacts the synchronicity of other people's brains we intend. So
Interesting.
I've been in a room and I've spoken to 10,000 people. And if I'm present and I'm inspired by something, that whole room will go into a trance state, be inspired, have tears in their eyes with me, and they'll just be present with that. And the information goes right in.
Yeah.
So that now is known. It's called a collective synchronicity. We now know that is non-locally entangled with people that we're dominating our thoughts on. So there is now a quantum explanation, and there's also a basic neurological explanation of how important it is to be clear about what you want, make sure it's congruent with what's really valuable to you, and make sure you're willing to do whatever it takes, travel whatever distance, and pay whatever price to get it out, get there, and make it real.
I love it. I think I may have to change this law of attraction to a filtered reality,
A
right?
filtered reality. It is.
Right. You're selectively observing reality against my objectives and go, okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. And these need to connect to get me where I want to get. And
That's it.
that's law of attraction ultimately, right?
That's it. If
Yeah.
you have a woman who has 3 children under the age of 5 and she's 35 years old and her highest value is children, when she walks in a mall, she's going to see children's education, children's entertainment, children's
Yeah.
clothes, children's food. she's not going to see computers. She's not going to see business. She's not going to see which companies are busy to buy stock in because her value is her children. But you take her husband, who has the same number of children, and who's an entrepreneur, and he walks in that mall, he's not going to see what she sees. She's going to filter her reality through her thalamus, and he's going to see a bookstore. He's going to see a men's suit store. He's going to see what company's busy to look at stocks. Yep. He's going to look at how it's managed and who's great employees in case he wants to pull one of those employees. He's going to filter his reality completely different than her because of his hierarchy of values. The hierarchy of your values dictates your business destiny. Yeah. And the hierarchy of your values dictates your overall life destiny. That's why knowing yourself and being yourself and living authentically and delegating lower priority things liberates you to maximize the potential in the sensory and motor functions of your brain.
Love it. And by the way, the other one is, I know you can hear 100 kids cry. When her kid cries, she knows it's her kid. She knows it's her kid, right? So yeah. John, this was spectacular. I think we could probably talk for 4 hours, but unfortunately we don't have that much time.
We'll do it again. Maybe we'll do another one.
I would love that. Yes, we'll get you on the calendar for another one. That'd be awesome. Hey, if somebody wanted more Dr. Demartini in their life, what would be the best way to get a hold of you?
All they got to do is go to drdemartini.com. And Perfect. If they're interested in values, there's a complimentary private value determination process that I've developed over the last 46 years. It's more objective than most of the oughts, how it ought to be. How is it? Yeah. Knowing what your real values are is really important, not what you think it should be, but what it actually is.
Got it. I have a friend who says when people go to ought and should, she goes, stop shoulding all over me.
Exactly. Well, it was the Scottish philosopher David Hume who said there's an is and there's an ought. And I've studied I read every book that was available on the values at axiology at the time and when I was 23 years old. And I saw that there was a distinction between is and ought, and everybody was doing the oughts. This is how I ought to be. I ought to have these values. I realized that's basically going to create an internal conflict between what your own true intrinsic values are. I want to know what the intrinsic values are, not what they ought to be. That way I know what's going to be really, truly, you're going to be dedicated, reliable, and disciplined in doing. And that way you know yourself. So that's the distinction. So if they go to the website, drdemartini.com, they can get access. That'll be a useful tool.
Perfect. And on that note, I think we're going to call it a day. Dr. John, thank you so much. I appreciate it. You can get back to sailing now. And thank you, everybody, for joining us on the CEO Project Podcast. We'll see you next time. Thanks for listening to the CEO Project Podcast. We'll see you next time. Be sure to subscribe to get all the future episodes and check out our website, www.theceoproject.com.